The regular session of the Urban Renewal Commission for Wednesday, September 16th. We can take roll.
Commissioner Benville?
Here.
Commissioner Polly?
Here.
All right. Sorry.
Commissioner Holliday?
Here.
Commissioner Shaw and Commissioner Mengelberg are absent. Commissioner Smith?
Here. All right.
Just as an aside, is Commissioner Shaw going to be absent at the City Commission meeting as well?
I haven't heard.
Okay.
All right, so we start with citizen comments, and I don't see any. Is there any? Well, I do see. So, Jonathan Stone.
Are you green lighting me?
Yes. Well, I don't have that power. So
Right.
you're good.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Stone. I'm the Executive Director of the Downtown Oregon City Association and the resident of Oregon City. The letter/attachment that I just passed around is about a project that the Downtown Association is pursuing, and we were hoping that the Urban Renewal Commission might see this as an interesting fit as a small allocation for this, since it mimics some of the projects that have been done downtown in the past and pairs with the storefront program. What it is the design committee and the board of directors has identified a microgrant program, and more specifically an artist sign microgrant program, to help businesses afford signs that they would otherwise maybe not afford. And in our research and looking around, we determined when we first walked into this, we're thinking, $1,000 grants would be sufficient to do what we wanted to do. And it turns out that if you look at the pictures there, those are not $1,000 signs. They're not even $2,000 signs. They're probably more like $7,000 signs. And so seeing that as what we want to help downtown achieve, we're looking for partners in this project. And so we've raised $13,000 so far towards this project. And so what I'm asking is for a possible agenda item to discuss this particular proposal in more detail. And the letter there explains some of that reasoning and why we're approaching urban renewal specifically.
Okay. Questions or comments?
Just as a reminder or clarification, for the storefront grant, is there a minimum that they have to apply for? The reason why I ask is, like, sometimes I think that sooner or later there won't be as many storefront grants being applied for.
There's not. There's a minimum on. There's a threshold of when they have to go out for 3 bids, and that's above $5,000.
Okay.
But there's not a minimum on the storefront grant.
So
could someone do a storefront grant and ask for signage?
Well, he could, but I was looking into the storefront grant, and signs are not qualified.
Right.
They're not eligible.
Got it. Okay.
That's what I thought.
Okay.
Some of I know like the Metro funded and then some of the Urban Renewal funded, and I guess maybe the lines are not very clear as to who's paying for what, right? But recent projects have paid for signage infrastructure on some of the gateway buildings, but Metro has also been involved in those buildings as well. I do know that earlier on there was some signage programs that is before my time, but my understanding is that Urban Renewal was involved potentially in those projects, but I could be wrong.
It was only a few years ago, and well, I don't know if it was a few years ago. I say it's a few years, and that usually means 10, but I think it was less than. It was while I was on the commission. I know we did. We didn't do sign grants as Urban Renewal Agency, but we gave funds for downtown to use for similar process like this. And I know it's been a discussion that we've had with Urban Renewal in the past about signage for permanent buildings or signage for tenants, and how there was a concern about having signage for businesses that may not last, and those kind of discussions. Does anyone have? I guess what I wouldn't mind having this as a topic to discuss. I don't. I would think if we did, it would be in more of a work session format, and to see how it fits into our current plan, and if it doesn't, then to talk about it for the next. I don't know. Carol.
But I do think that we should ask our finance director about budgeting, and if it's possible to do this, and kind of the mechanism that we would go through to increase the budget to make room for this. I think that's probably first before we even discuss it further.
I agree.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Smith and Commissioner Pauly. So two things on the budget that come to mind. One is we have a contingency set aside of a couple of $100,000, so that we could go through a budget adjustment process to move contingency funds to be able to allow for our projects such as this. The other thing, I'm a fan of Jonathan's work, and I did see the picture that he put up of Kung Food, and I want to have that in our downtown. That's pretty exciting to me. We did, as we went through the formal budget process, because the funds were so tight for the urban renewal, I know that there were some other projects that weren't really considered. So I do have some reservations about stepping outside of that process for something like this, kind of at the, past the final hours. But that would be up to the commission. We can probably pencil something together if needed.
Or maybe a work session like Rocky suggested, maybe of different things that we were thinking of for that contingency, or part of it maybe, because it's always good to have a contingency.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think in some of those cases the ship might have sailed, and then we thought, well, the urban renewal is kind of tight because we have the debt service payments that we need to make, the specific programs we were looking into, and so we sort of said nothing else on the plate. So we'd have to dig up some of those things. I don't know if that's what I'm saying so much as just, we make an exception here, somebody else comes up, then you might be foregoing something down the road. Just something to consider.
I think it would be a good workshop to discuss. I don't know if a whole full-fledged new grant program might be the best thing for staff and everything else. So it might be something to consider as kind of tweaking what we already have for a storefront grant. But
I think Eric and I briefly had a conversation about that, and part of by the Downtown Association being the applicant for whatever you would call this, technically speaking, to make the urban renewal justification for it, is that we are the applicant in a way, and that so we're not bringing 20 different sign grant applications to the commission, that we would have an approved process that you guys would approve, so that it's following the intent of the use of the funds.
Eric, do you have?
Just one thing I believe that needs to be considered is if we move forward on this is whether or not a program like this is eliminating blight, which is the central focus of the urban renewal funds. I can see storefront grants where some paint repair of the buildings on the outside to make them more presentable and make the area more appealing for businesses is an elimination of blight, but customized signs for businesses. I think that there's a gray area there. Not sure how that would be perceived, but the program is creating signs for business that may or may not stay in the city.
Not as gray as using urban renewal to build City Hall.
There's also an issue about well, I guess they would have to go through the sign. They would have to comply with the sign ordinance and go through planning to make sure that that's approved before we would award any funds for that. We wouldn't want to award any grant monies for a sign that hasn't been through that process, because we would be saying it's automatically approved.
If taken to another agenda item, we would explain in more detail how this type of program would meet all of the planning requirements and building code requirements, and the program itself is modeled after a successful program in Cincinnati that's been sponsored by the American Sign Museum, and which I guess is why they have such fantastic signs. But that there's a very well-defined process to make sure that what gets funded is supported by the community and has matching funds and all that in place.
I wouldn't mind seeing this on a work session.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
All right, thank you. And then now we have any changes to the agenda?
No.
Nope.
Nope. All right, that brings us to general business. 15507 Grand Cove Soil Agreement Revision Amendment Request.
Thank you,
Eric.
Mr. Chair. So this is a request to amend the soil agreement that was signed on April 20th of this year. The long and short of it, the reason being is they need some extra time to submit the preliminary grading plan. They submitted a grading plan early on that has been kind of going back and forth between Public Works and Grand Cove, and it's been negotiated. And up until last week, I believe they've come up with a solution, something that would work. And so they're needing some additional time to actually draft that plan and submit it. So that would count as the preliminary grading plan, and then we would move forward in review to approve the final grading plan for this project. One of the reasons they needed to amend it is they have changed the location, or they modified the location of where some soil would be extracted. So that's moved to Lot 1 of the urban renewal property. And they're needing an additional, I think, 5,000 cubic yards of dirt to fill the garden apartment site.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any discussion, questions? Do we have a motion?
Move to approve the Grand Cove Soil Agreement Revision Amendment Request.
I second it.
Moved and seconded. Can we have roll, please?
Commissioner Benville?
Vote.
Commissioner Benville?
Aye.
Earth to Derek.
Sorry, I was looking at my panel.
Commissioner Holiday?
Aye.
Commissioner Polly?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye. And brings us to 15-444, the Cove Disposition and Development Agreement Precondition Requirement, Section 14.2.8, Land Use Approval Applications.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is one of the preconditions that was listed in the DDA is for the Cove Development to submit their application for land use approval. And what you have attached to the report is the application itself, along with all the exhibits that go along to make it a complete application. So it was verified from the planning department that this was deemed complete. So tonight we're approving this in concept. This is not a technical review. It's just allowing us to move forward so that technical review can happen.
So this has been a long awaited for.
It's been a long awaited, yes, yes. Very
say the
long awaited.
least.
I will mention that all the other preconditions in the DDA have been satisfied. They've made some pretty good progress as of late. And
Yeah, I think I was looking at the timeline. It looks like that we're tracking that and the requirements for meeting that.
yes, well, we've gone over on a couple of the timelines, but a lot of information was being submitted, a lot of progress was being made, so I allowed a little flexibility on that, and we have come to completion, full satisfaction of the preconditions. You do have before you the DDA timeline as one of the exhibits.
Mm-hmm.
Carol?
So it looks like everything's pretty much how we've discussed. Is there any new information in here, Eric, or any changes?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
As far as everything in the land use application, everything that we've discussed. There's nothing new.
Everything
or-
that you've discussed,
Okay.
everything that was listed in the DDA, it's all there.
Okay. Thank you.
Direction, anybody? Motion, do we need a motion for this, right? Or do you just want to, we're doing a motion, right?
Yes, please.
Motion.
I move to approve item 15-444, the code disposition and development agreement, precondition requirements, section 14.2.8, land use approval application.
Second.
Okay, call for the vote.
Commissioner Benville?
Aye.
Commissioner Holiday?
Aye.
Commissioner Polly?
Aye.
Chair Smith?
Aye. And that brings us to 15-516, the Cove Project DDA amendment request.
Just a second, it's having trouble booting up here on my computer.
Trying to keep up.
Yeah, really. So this is an amendment request to the DDA from Clackamas Cove LLC. There are two reasons for the amendment. One is to extend the time period because they are wanting to submit their land use review after the pre-application meeting has happened. That hasn't happened yet. As far as part of that pre-application, there's going to be a review of the Natural Resources Overlay District, floodplain management, and storm management. They anticipate some revisions out of that meeting, and so they want to have time to incorporate those revisions or recommendations from planning into the submission. So they're asking for an additional 60 days to do that. And then after the pre-application meeting would happen, they were asking for an additional 45 days before submittal. There's also a portion of the amendment that deals with temporary parking on Lot 5, which is the lot right in the middle of the two buildings. They're having there are going to be some restaurants there on either end of those buildings, and there's supposedly a pretty high turnover rate. They want to be able to park those during the time before they construct Phase 5.
So to clarify, we needed to approve 4B before we can amendment with 4C. Is that right? Is this tied to the same DDA?
Yes. Let me.
As a revision to the DDA?
No, the 4B was.
No, 4B's. I'm sorry. My computer's having issues. 4B is separate. 4B is just one of the preconditions in the DDA.
Requirements.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, I'd like to kind of understand a little bit more about the use of that parking lot number 5 or lot number 5.
I can explain that. Name is Ed Darrow, developer of the Cove. In the center of the project,
I can't see that sign.
Lot 5 is right here. And on each side of Lot 5, we have the apartment condo buildings. And at the lower level next to Lot 5, there's 1,625 square feet of restaurant in each of these buildings. In terms of planning, the parking that it's allocated for the project, not considering 5, is correct as far as the code goes. But for convenience, this lot will be spun out and will be fully developed when we do the rest of this project, the waterfront, 195 units. The idea is to create a small parking here and a small parking here that would be subject to timing. Lot 5 is designed for up to 80,000 square feet of office. There really isn't an urban user out there right now, and to do that on a spec basis is not a good idea. I mean, it wouldn't work right now. So ultimately, the idea would be to, on an interim basis, have temporary parking here. And the way the DDA reads is that after Phase 2, you can develop Phase 3 or 4 3 is this, and 4 is this. So whichever one comes first, the next one would come, but they're all subject to a definitive timeline. So if this was to be developed next after this, then we would remove that temporary parking, and part of the parking that goes here is 272 spaces across the street, which is part of the Tri-City. And we have had several discussions with Tri-City, and they submitted a letter on for lot 2. So that negotiation is going well. There might be an issue relative to them wanting a reversionary right if, in fact, we don't use this, or at some point in time after the lease term would go back and be able to be used by Tri-City. So that's kind of the basis for that request. One other thing in the last conversation was that we asked for 45 days after the pre-application, and my biggest concern was that having assisted the Grand Cove guys on this site, the pre-application process was very extended. The number of comments that came back out of the pre-application conference was substantial. It's probably taken 60 to 90 days to answer those questions. I don't expect that to happen on the waterfront, but if in fact we had a conflict, the idea would be to, once we receive a definition of all the deficiencies, if there are any, and we are able to answer those, then that 45-day period would start, just not after the conference itself. So I need to know what we haven't submitted or what they consider incorrect, and then we'll modify that.
And tonight we'd just be approving this in principle. The request kind of came in at crunch time, and so legal hasn't really had a thorough chance to review it. But they are reviewing it now. I did get an oral statement from our land use attorney that he doesn't see any problems with it, but he's going back and scrutinizing the request.
So I'm unsure as what you're asking us to do here, because if we approve it, right?
You're approving it in principle. That way, if
I'm not sure how we do that.
So if there are revisions that need to be made, then we'll bring it back.
Contingent on change.
And just a small comment, the way the request is made is that it'll still come back to you when there's a final plan for the actual physical design
Okay.
of that parking.
So just an aside, we had a Tri-City Advisory Committee meeting today, and in that there was a description of this project using treated effluent as a secondary water source for landscaping and even possibly washing machines and toilets to reduce, recycle the water that we're using, so we wouldn't be using that as effluent. It wouldn't be going out as effluent. Under our permit, it would be going to this project, and it would be kind of a win-win for both sides. So I thought that was a creative use of the proximity to the wastewater treatment plant.
Yes, the Grand Cove guys and myself met with them 2 weeks ago, went through the program. It's a matter of where that utility would be. Landscaping is no question. Washer dryers is a little questionable in my mind.
Right. Well, dryers don't need water.
Yeah, well, no. Yeah. So that's still on the table. They're preparing numbers for us, so we'll see really what the cost differential would be. So it should be it seems quite obvious it'll be a win for everybody, but it's a matter of how you utilize that water.
Right. I just wanted to give you guys credit for, doing something creative down there that, helps everybody. So
There was one unique statement which it said that you could use the water if you're using it in combination with alcoholic beverages. I went, pardon me?
All right, well,
technically you
brewery
can
down there.
drink the effluent. It's treated to the point where,
Can be.
yeah.
What would you call that drink?
It's probably substantially better than most of the water in third world countries. So,
Yeah, and I do apologize for the the request to approve in principle is a little bit unique, but we were trying to move this forward. If there are things that need to be changed in here that I feel are necessary to bring back to the commission, we'll bring them back as such. We don't believe that's the case, but we were going through this pretty quick, trying to get it prepared for the URC meeting. The other thing, I just want to point out, some of these requests, such as temporary parking, that still needs to go through the land use process. So I don't want tonight's approval to be interpreted as an approval of such a request.
Okay, so I would move to approve the Cove Project Disposition and Development Agreement amendment request in principle, and any revisions would be brought back to the Urban Renewal Commission.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded.
I believe that's
Vote,
the
please.
first time I've ever made that motion.
In preliminary, or
Commissioner Shaw,
Yes, I'm sorry I was late, Ed, but I have read the materials and stuff here, so I think I can make a qualified motion on, or yay on this. Yes.
Commissioner Benville,
yes.
Commissioner Holiday,
Aye.
Commissioner Polly,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye. All right, that brings us to 15.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Move to approve the minutes of August 19th,
There you go.
2015 regular meeting.
I second.
Moved and seconded. Call for vote.
Commissioner Shaw,
Aye.
Commissioner Benville,
Aye.
Commissioner Holiday,
Aye.
Commissioner Polly,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye. And then we have future agenda items, which we already mentioned the sign discussion, so that should be on there, and anything else.
I can't think of anything right off the top of my head. Mr. Manager?
I can't think of anything else that we've discussed lately, and I do not have any updates tonight for.
We're adjourned.
Thank you.